Hello and welcome to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Jimmy of House Nuts, and this is the culmination of a lot of work and a lot of parts for an iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Jimmy, you sort of brought up these iceberg theories to me. I've seen a couple in the past, but we decided we should do one for House of the Dragon Season 1. It goes a little bit further into it, as well as some of the events in Game of Thrones, some changes possibly to the show as they're making a connected verse there. But this was a lot of fun. We did this in 3 separate parts, so if you're listening on the podcast, you can view or listen to each one as is, or you can listen to or view on YouTube the whole thing right here. And this was an absolute ton of fun. And the theories, they start out, pretty straightforward, and then the deeper we go, the crazier they get. So let's kick it off right here with our first theory. Are the Maesters working against Viserys Targaryen? A long-running theory in A Song of Ice and Fire is that the Maesters have a grand conspiracy to destroy or control magic. One key moment we see in Game of Thrones is when Samwell Tarly goes to the Citadel and is essentially laughed out of the room for even bringing up the idea of White Walkers still being in existence. In the books, the Maesters have also speculated to hate the Targaryens as they dislike magic and dragons. Their hatred for dragons and magic was described in A Feast for Crows, wherein Archmaester of the Citadel, Marwyn the Mage, stated, "Who do you think killed all the dragons the last time around? Gallant dragon slayers armed with swords," he spat. "The world the Citadel is building has no place in it for sorcery or prophecy or glass candles, much less dragons." So even if there is hate from the Maesters towards the Targaryens, how are they moving against Viserys and House of the Dragon? Well, Hand of the King Otto Hightower, his house was integral in the building of the Citadel and still funds the institution. It is the central home for the Order of the Maesters. We've already seen the Hand of the King make King Viserys banish his brother from court in Episode 1 of House of the Dragon. Furthermore, the king was also shown to have injured himself while sitting on the Iron Throne, an injury that the Maesters cannot heal or fix. Furthermore, the medieval Caesarean performed on the Queen was also the Grand Maester's suggestion, an event that didn't end well. Otto also seems to be tightening the grip on the king and making his daughter court the king and ultimately marry him after his wife's death. All of these events further indicate how Otto Hightower and the Archmaesters have weakened Viserys. He lost his wife and brother within a couple of days, and he has an incurable disease, and now they are getting closer to fully control him.
One of the things that I was most excited about House of the Dragon is that, as a firm believer in the Grand Maester conspiracy, is that I felt like we were getting breadcrumbs to lead us to the conclusion that this theory just might be correct.
In the books, that strongly believe the Grand Maester conspiracy is a huge plot. It's one of the, if you just go look up the biggest Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire theories, this one is always towards the top. It's been as long running as R plus L equals J. I felt like the show, because we didn't spend that much time with Maesters, or at least Maesters that were sort of conspiring, that we didn't get to sort of see that. It was just that one scene of Sam getting laughed out of the room. In the books, it's far more prevalent. And even in the history books, there's a lot of back and forth sort of issues with the Maesters. Much of Fire and Blood and, World of Ice and Fire is told to us through these two perspectives, Mushroom and, an Archmaester. They have back and forth accounts, and this is the text that they're using to adapt House of the Dragon. So you even see this favoritism towards certain things, right? And certain people in the books that's being used as the text to describe and ultimately create the show House of the Dragon. I think they did a great job here. And, Otto's keeping Viserys, as we see towards the end of the season, sort of at bay with Milk of the Poppy, and it feels like there's Maesters always around him, working on him. The minute that Viserys dies, the Maesters in the room on the small council, like, okay, well, we'll just, we're moving forward with our plans.
Yeah, they were ready to go. And, another person that throws a lot of shade at the gray rats, as she calls them, is Lady Dustin in A Dance with Dragons. It starts, for me, that was the first time it really opened up my eyes to be like, yeah, the Maesters are in a pretty interesting position here. And we see, obviously, the Baratheon in House of the Dragon season 1, who ends up not being able to read, gives it to its Maester. There's a lot of power there. So I've always been very weary of the Maesters since finishing reading the series, and to see that this is kind of being perpetuated in the show was wonderful for me. I really enjoyed it. So I'm actually a believer of this conspiracy theory.
Oh, as am I. I think there's a lot of evidence for it. The glass candles at the Citadel, as we see in the main books. Some of the theories we will be going over today, I mean, I should say, is we're in full spoiler territory. We haven't spoiled anything yet, but just so you know, we will have to be, obviously, I think, in full spoiler territory. The whole thing about the Dance of the Dragons is that it's basically also kind of called the dying of the dragons, is that this is really the height of the Targaryen dynasty, and this civil war causes a lot of these dragons to die, and there aren't many left for much longer after this. So after this, man, I feel like the Maesters begin to rise a little bit more in power too. There's also the faith, which plays a part. So there are these sort of other organizations out there doing thing. And I think so often we just view it, especially because of the show, as like, oh, it's House Lannister or it's House Stark or, Tully or Targaryen or Baratheon, whoever trying to vie for power. But that's not always the case. The Maesters and the Faith are both strong institutions out there also vying for power.
Yes, very, very important institution. And as magic leaves the world and dragons leave the world, it's these institutions that will kind of fill that power vacuum left over from that. So, I just think they could have done a better job treating Viserys. That's all I'm saying. I saw some winks, between the Maesters and Otto, and I don't trust them. I don't trust them at all, Matt.
No, I don't trust them either, but I definitely believe in the idea of the Grand Maester conspiracy, both here in House of the Dragon. If really all this season 1 of House of the Dragon did, which George has said multiple times is better than his books. So you can kind of take that for whatever canon you want. But all it does is sort of add even more weight to that theory.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. And, this is, like you said, this is tier 1 of the iceberg. So some of these might seem kind of obvious, but as we go down deeper, some of the stuff we have for you in the last part, folks, is absolutely insane. Like, I can't believe some people believe some of this stuff.
I can't believe people wrote articles about it on the internet and then they got as many views and run Reddit and as much traction as they did, but we're going to dive into them. And, I'm just saying that to say there's a lot of things on this iceberg that I don't necessarily believe. This is one that I do believe, though. So absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the next one here on tier 1. Harwin Strong is the father of Rhaenyra's children. Out of everything that comes out of these conspiracies from season 1 House of the Dragon, I think this has to be one of the most obvious ones that's most likely to be true. In House of the Dragon season 1, we get all but exact confirmation that Harwin Strong and Rhaenyra have been romantically involved. With Laenor marrying out of duty, it is not a reach to believe Rhaenyra looked elsewhere for certain types of satisfaction. In episode 6, we see some very intimate and emotional moments before Harwin is sent off to Harrenhal, ultimately to his demise, and it's all due to the fact that there are rumors swirling around the Red Keep about Rhaenyra and Harwin. Even outside of the obvious displays of affection that we see between Rhaenyra and Harwin, the biggest clue to this being true is the striking resemblance that all of Rhaenyra's children happen to have with Harwin and the Strong family in general. Dark hair, light skin, which is pretty much the polar opposite of Laenor, who is her proper husband. While this all seems, obvious and confirmed, it's not totally told to us to be 100% factual. So it earns a place here in the crowd of all the theories that we're doing here on this iceberg. But if I was a betting man, I would put the house on this theory being true.
Yeah, and this one is one that's like, well, we watched the show, it seems pretty obvious. But if you actually go back and you dive into the books, it's sort of very loosely alluded to. They actually confirmed it far more in the show than they did in the books. However, I will say there is a little bit of questioning, and we'll get to possibly another theory later as we move into another step down the iceberg, that maybe all of Rhaenyra's kids are not Harwin Strongs. Could be some, could be none, could be maybe two of them. So take that for what you will. But yes, this one certainly seems obvious. Seems even more likely that if they're not Harwin Strongs, they're very much not Valeryon, that they're not actually Valeryon blood. You go read the books, it was just sort of like alluded to. Well, they were close, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff on this iceberg deals with parentage, especially the top tiers, because there's so many questions. I mean, it's more confusing than Peter Baelish brothel birthing center of who the father is of some of these children, and we're going to have to get to the bottom of it. But you did allude to the fact that this theory might clash with one that we have a little bit further down on the iceberg. I think we'll probably get to that one in possibly part 2, or we might get to it today.
It's in part 2.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
so
we'll get to it today.
Yeah, and we're going to move right along to the final entry here on the tier 1 of the iceberg. Lemongate Easter egg theory confirmed, possibly? For many years, fans have speculated about Daenerys Targaryen's childhood and her recollections from those days. There seem to have been consistencies in the visions that Dany has, the main one being that growing up in Braavos and seeing a lemon tree is not something that tracks. Lemon trees are not native to Braavos, which has led many to theorize that Dany was in fact not in Braavos during this time of her childhood. Fuel was definitely added to the fire when George R.R. Martin alluded to this being the case when answering a fan's question many years ago. The question from the fan went as so. Dany remembers a lemon tree outside the house with a red door in Braavos, but citrus trees shouldn't really grow in Braavos' cold, foggy climate. Is this difference significant? Does it point to future revelations about Dany's past? George R.R. Martin, always being sly, answered like this. Very perceptive of you. Yes, it does point to, well, that would be telling. George leaves it very ambiguous, but gives us enough breadcrumbs to send us all into theory mode, and the fandom did just that. And while we don't have an answer to the questions that are posed by this theory, we do have an Easter egg from House of the Dragon Season 1 that gives a nod to this theory of Lemongate. Larys and Alicent are talking in episode 5 of House of the Dragon near the site of the Weirwood tree. Larys begins to talk about how a native plant from Braavos shouldn't be able to grow in King's Landing, claiming it is an outsider among the natives. Larys is clearly playing to Alicent's feelings of loneliness and seclusion, but the more important piece is that while they are having this conversation, an image is seen in the background just over Larys' shoulder that shows, yes, you guessed it, a lemon tree front and center. Ryan Condell is a huge fan of the source material and also theories from this fandom, so one has to assume this was intentionally placed and worded to give us all something to go in and rave about. Ryan Condell is a huge nerd, just like us, confirmed.
The idea that Dany is actually raised in Dorne, not necessarily over in Essos. Or obviously she goes to Essos at some point, and she would be there when she's very young. I don't know. I've always been sort of on the fence about this one, and it's one of those that I think will ultimately get enough information in Winds of Winter, should or if it ever comes out, to see if Dany does make allegiances or alliances with Dorne, which I think is I think Dorne is going to reach out even further to her. Check my Aegon's Crown. Where is Aegon's Crown and where is Blackfire theories I've talked about a little bit as well, to get more information on that. You know, unfortunately, Game of Thrones, the show, the first time the show ever really dipped was when they sort of introduced some of the Dorne arcs that they were going to go down, and they just completely ran away from it. So it's, you know, who knows how that would have progressed had the Dorne angle been just as good as everything else. Nonetheless, the nod, it is certainly a nod to that theory in House of the Dragon, without question.
Yeah, and the first time I watched this scene, whenever Larys is talking about this Braavos-y plant sitting there, growing in King's Landing out of its element, I immediately thought of Lemongate, but I didn't actually see the picture of the lemon tree behind Larys until the next day when I rewatched it. You know, I always just look for other things, right? Other details when we're covering the show. And seeing that lemon tree, I was like, oh my God, there's no way that this is a coincidence. And I'll put on my tinfoil hat and just say, hey, Ryan Condell knows some answers to some of the things that we ask questions about. Supposedly, he knows the ending of Dunk and Egg now. That is something he mentioned in an interview. And I always just wonder, with Winds of Winter always being so much closer every day, hopefully, to coming out, is Ryan Condell trying to stir up a little something for the fans to get to talk about, and maybe we'll see some answers in Winds of Winter. If anything, this is a great nod and a fantastic Easter egg, and instills a lot of confidence in me that there's the right nerd making this show.
Agreed. Okay, well, now let's dive into tier 2 of the iceberg. Things
Little
are
peek
about to
under
get
the water.
a little darker, a little more crazy, right? So Aemond is the father of Helaena Targaryen's children. Is Aemond the father of Helaena Targaryen's children? In House of the Dragon, we see Aemond not only say he would perform his duty when talking about marrying his sister, he is also shown to come out of her room. He gives Jace a very discerning look when he dances with her in episode 8, and he stands by her side in many scenes, including the beast beneath the boards. It would also have huge implications and significance for an upcoming part in books and season 2 called Blood and Cheese, where Daemon hires an assassin to kill one of Helena's children as a response to Luke's death. If these are now Aemon's kids, it has far more weight and significance, since he will be the one viewed as killing Viserys, also making him a kinslayer.
This one is very interesting, and I am leaning towards believing the show is going to make Aemond the father of those children. I just think that enough was sprinkled in earlier, even when they're kids, like really young. I think that this might be the way that they're going to go. And it would definitely add a lot more drama to Blood and Cheese, no doubt.
Yeah, another thing we need to think about too is that the books, when talking, it talks a little bit about Aegon being kind of promiscuous, right? And there is some favoritism from Aemond possibly towards Helaena, but the show went far further with Aegon, making him almost feel like a Robert Baratheon, right? Out there just chasing brothels and serving maids and all of those things, as opposed to his wife. To me, it added a lot more credibility to it, simply because we see Aegon's not interested at all in her, and Aemond clearly is. Then you add in the idea of now it's possibly his children. It just adds so much more drama, so much more weight, and it goes in a very long line of this sort of undercurrent in House Targaryen. If you begin really diving into the tree, there's actually potentially bastards that go on to be very significant players from start to finish in the Targaryen dynasty. It also, in theory, since they're not married, would make Rhaenyra kind of the real true winner of the Dance of the Dragons, because one of the things that happens is Rhaenyra's son Aegon III marries Helena's daughter, and then that as the final pact to sort of rejoin House Targaryen. Well, if Rhaenyra's daughter, whose name I'm blanking on, is now a bastard, then you can kind of say, well, she's not even a real true Targaryen, because at the end you kind of view it as, well, they both win in a way, because their kids get married and then the throne is restored. But now it's almost like, well, no, it's really only Rhaenyra that wins.
And it's not blood, it's the name, right? That's what we're told in the show. I think the evidence against this would be the fact that a lot of people feel like it does not track with Helena's character in the show. She doesn't seem like someone that would have an affair. But I also don't believe that she's a character that seems like she wouldn't be interested in maybe actually feeling love, which I think Aemond is probably one to provide that. It's not a surprise if they would end up together, to me, because I feel like they're both slightly misunderstood. Helaena probably way more so than Aemond, but Aemond clearly has a more emotional side, and he's seen, as most people post season 1, he will be seen as a psychopath. I could see them bonding through that, and maybe they have already bonded before this.
Right. And who also doesn't know the way Aegon goes? Aegon might know and not care.
He didn't even want the crown in the show, right? He said,
right.
Aemond said, I'll take it. And he's like, well, hey, that's not a bad idea. And then Crispy Cole ruined it.
Doesn't he say something along the lines of like, oh, Aegon's like, I wouldn't want to marry her. And Aemond's like, well, I would perform my duty. I don't know if he said it, or I have to go back and look, but the vibe he gave was like, well, you can have her. Well, okay, I guess I will.
That was kind of the vibe I got as well in that episode. Kind of like, well, whatever. It's not my preferred plaything. So I think this theory has some weight to it, and I especially think in the show that this could end up being confirmed in future seasons. So this one is good, and we're still in the believable phase, because once we get down to tier 3 and 4, I'm telling you guys, it's just
unbelievable.
It's outlandish.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to another one that is going to clash with another theory we had earlier. So, Cristin Cole is the father of Jaceres Valeryon. While the realm whispers, or in the case of House of the Dragon, publicly states that Harwin Strong is the father of Rhaenyra's children, one theory suggests that her firstborn could be the son of Cristin Cole. Given how important hair color and style has been used throughout the series to determine who is the father of many children in A Song of Ice and Fire, this theory looks at how Jaceres' hair, while black like Harwin's, isn't as curly as his brother Luke's. While we also see that Rhaenyra does sleep with Cristin, and when found out is given moon tea, otherwise known as Westerosi Plan B, to drink it, but we never see her actually drink it in the episode. So is it possible that Jaceres Valeryon is actually the son of Cristin Cole? When he asks her, am I, is he my father? She says, you are a Targaryen.
This one is fun for the same reason that the last one is because, man, would that add a lot more drama to this entire Civil War. It would make it a lot more messy. This one I'm not as sold on as the last one, which is why we put it after. I think this one is a little bit more, because we're going really off of timing, hairstyle, but in theory, I think it's possible. I know in the books it doesn't line up timeline wise, but the timeline has been changed in the show. It's not the exact same timeline as far as years go by and whatnot. So I would love for someone to be able to disprove this if they could figure out the show's exact timeline from episode to episode.
Yeah, I think it's true in the show.
Yeah, you like this one. This is one of your favorite theories, right?
Well, because there's so much going for it. One, the hairstyle. The casting in this show has been very specific and very good, right? I mean, like Olivia Cook, and you look at Emily Carey, and then you have Emma Darcy and Miliaka. The hair, the makeup, everything, just their facial features, they're so similar to the young and old versions. And then Luke has very curly hair, just like Harwin Strong. I mean, Harwin Strong's hair is like Kit Harington's. I mean, it's like they got a curling iron out there, while they're out there training. It's ridiculous. It's just so. And then Cristin Cole's got this very like nice straight hair style, and if you look at him next to Jaceres Valeryon, their hair looks like identical. It's not just the hair color. Sometimes it's the hair style. It's one of the reasons that people think that Mira Reed, given that she's born in the same year as Jon Snow, and that she goes back to Howland Reed when Ned Stark takes Jon Snow back to Winterfell, and it was Howland Reed's the whole reason we got out of the Tower of Joy alive. It's one of the big reasons everyone thinks that she could be Jon's twin, because the hair it's this long black curly hair as well. So it's not just the hair color, but the fact that she doesn't, it's left open, the tea, right? For a couple of reasons. One, if she drinks it, then she kind of admits that she did.
Yeah.
If she doesn't drink it, and we have no idea whether she did or not. If she doesn't drink it, then she could say, well, I don't have to drink it because I didn't do anything wrong. That also means if she doesn't drink it and going down the route of saying I didn't do anything wrong, then she could be pregnant. And who would that be with? Well, that would be with, Cristin Cole. And then the timeline could in theory work up. And then when asked, she says, you're a Targaryen.
Yeah, because he asked if Harwin is his father.
Now that leaves it open too, because the idea is, well, you're a Targaryen. You're my son. That's like all you need to know. Well, that's what Ned Stark says. You have Stark blood. You have my blood, right? Just saying, man. There's some similarities.
Hey, and you know what? This is one of those. Unless if it's proven, it won't be disproven in the show, because they wouldn't backtrack to talk about it if it's not true, right? So in theory, I mean, it's kind of headcanon at this point. So even if they never disprove it in the future seasons of the show, you could watch the show with this headcanon in mind, and it kind of makes it different. Like, it's a whole different experience if you think about it like that.
Yeah, I think it's fun, and I think it's
It's a
just
lot of fun.
it's the way they leave some of these things open to interpretations. Like, well, this was left open, so it opens the possibility for all these other things, and then
Mhm.
this was left open, so it also opens up the possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of the more fun ones here on the iceberg, and I wonder if we'll get any confirmation. I wonder if that will come to play down the line.
Yeah, you never know.
Never know. I guess
So
I guess that puts us here to our last entry here on tier 2 and the ending of the first part of our iceberg series. And this one is one of my favorites. Viserys dreamt the dinner scene in episode 8. This theory is one that I love and is really up for your interpretation as the viewer. This theory states that the dinner scene in episode 8 of House of the Dragon was a fevered illusion or dream from Viserys' perspective. At first, I said, pretty much absolutely no way this could be true, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how crazy it is that both sides at this dinner are getting along so well. They're smiling, they're joking, they're laughing, and Otto Hightower seems to be wildly out of character as he's making faces and funny noises towards Alicent, and it's sending her into a fit of giggles. It's a really wonderful scene. But the suspicion begins whenever you believe that if these are real events, they stopped happening as soon as King Viserys was led out from the dinner to go to his bedchambers for him falling ill. Obviously, this is where Aemond delivers the strong line that results in the dinner becoming a complete disaster. So one has to ask, is that just simple timing? Or was this just Viserys' mental state declining and his own wishes becoming his distorted experience in this reality? Or did the Black and Greens truly put aside their feud for a loving, warm dinner for Viserys? But really, it's up for us and for you to decide.
yeah, I think that he wasn't dreaming it. I think it actually happened.
Okay.
Because I think it makes it even more sort of significant to Viserys being the glue that was holding everything together. I do really love the idea, though, of it possibly not being as good as Viserys thought, and it's this kind of dream he's having, especially because then he thinks he's talking to Rhaenyra later, and he's not.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of validity to the idea that it was this fever dream, or whatever, fever dream, or he's just delusional and gone. But yeah, ultimately I have to go against this one just because I think the significance of the story is that as soon as he leaves, it all breaks down.
Yeah, I think thematically for Viserys, the character, I think it is more important for this not to be an illusion. But I think from a directing perspective and a character perspective, it would be a really cool decision if this was an illusion. And the shots in that scene were very sporadic, and they cut a bunch of quick cuts to different people acting, very happy and putting aside this petty feud. So I like both instances a lot. I would tend to lean towards the side of thinking that it is most likely not an illusion, because I think as showrunners, they're probably more concerned with Viserys's, value to the family, especially this being his last episode, rather than showing him in a fevered state. I think it would probably have made it a little bit more obvious, but who knows? Maybe it's some more of that really subtle storytelling that Miguel and Ryan Condell have done in the past. I like this a lot just because it plays with the idea of perspective, though. So this is a really good entry.
Bran is watching through the Weirwoods. In Game of Thrones, Bran Stark gains the ability to see and influence past events through the use of Weirwood trees. We see him look back to Jon Snow's birth at the Tower of Joy. He sees other events like his father and his aunt as younger children playing, and he even wargs into Hodor, creating one of the saddest moments in the entire series. In the books, the theory goes much further, suggesting that Bran has influenced many events, including the Mad King's Burn Them All line, or perhaps his entire descent into madness. Just about anyone named Bran, fans have speculated that could actually be Bran Stark, like Bran the Builder, who helped build the wall. And the entire series could even end in some sort of major time-traveling reset, or that Bran is just simply involved in just about any major moment in the series with his ability to go back in time through the Weirwood trees. In House of the Dragon, many important scenes take place in front of a Weirwood tree, leading many fans to speculate if Bran, or perhaps another three-eyed raven or crow, if you're reading the books, is watching these events.
So I think we even said this all throughout season 1. Why are they talking in front of the weirwood? Why is there a weirwood in King's Landing? That's not book canon. It shouldn't be there. But for the show canon, I think that they might be hinting at some further connection, whether it be Bloodraven, whether it be Bran. I think that this has some legs. I think that the idea that maybe Bran is watching this history unfold. I'm not saying I'm all in, but I'm just saying maybe.
There's two ways to kind of view it, I guess. In the books, some of the events Bran sees, which we don't really get a lot, like so early on, he just has these sort of raven dreams, which are or crow dreams, which are influenced by Bloodraven, the three-eyed crow. And then later, Bran gets to the cave and he sort of has some visions, but it's very fast and it's hard to tell exactly what's going on. In the show, he doesn't necessarily have to be in front of a weirwood tree to see things. Like he goes and he sees the Tower of Joy and he goes and he sees some of these other things, but it's just sort of, I guess, a common belief or people are watching through the weirwood trees. Perhaps it's easier to look at something through a weirwood tree. It's never really been sort of fully established, but so often many people think they hear whispers or sounds, or they feel like the weirwood is watching them.
Yeah,
perhaps the weirwood tree itself is alive and conscious and is able to watch, and it's presenting information to the three-eyed raven or crow, depending on show or book.
Yeah, the Weirwood network, the internet of Westeros.
Mm-hmm.
And Theon in A Dance with Dragons is near the Weirwood in Winterfell, and he swears that he hears voices. And then you have like the ghost of Winterfell. You have all these things. And they all kind of center at least somewhat around a weirwood. So I think that this is a really cool theory. I like this one quite a bit. And I would be okay if this is something that, is show only. Who knows? Maybe House of the Dragon at the end curtain, it zooms out and Bran's just watching. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? And we're not done yet with the weirwoods.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the scenes is Rhaenyra and Alicent talking when they're younger.
Yes,
right.
Many of
many of their conversations take place in front of the weirwood, and it's just interesting to sort of point out that we still don't really know, in all honesty, because we haven't gotten far enough into it, into the books, what role the weirwoods are going to play in sort of the end game, but I believe it's going to be something rather significant.
Mm-hmm.
The Isle of Faces, this island, is said to contain a bunch of weirwood trees, and that people go there, they don't come back, and that's one of the big events in House of the Dragon. And again, one of the big battles ends at the God's Eye. Some people think, hey, maybe Daemon survives that battle and he goes to the Isle of Faces.
Yeah, the Isle of Faces remains one of the biggest question marks in all of Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. And these theories that play with that are they're fun. I think that they're really interesting and worth our time to consider, because that is something I do believe, at least in the books, if we get any future entries, will have some sort of answers for it.
Okay. All right, Jimmy.
All right, moving down the iceberg. This one here is completely ridiculous. All right, another entry for the Tier 3 iceberg is Mysaria is Melisandre or Quaithe. Mysaria has been somewhat of a mystery thus far in House of the Dragon and is ripe for speculation, as she seems to be one of those who keeps and shares many secrets. This has caused some fans to speculate that there must be more to this mysterious woman than just a terrible accent. Another character from Game of Thrones show that was also the center of a lot of theories and speculation was Melisandre, the Red Witch. With Mysaria so close to these major historical events, some have claimed this could be very young Melisandre affecting the course of history in Westeros, even having somewhat of a similar backstory to Mysaria. This seems highly unlikely, but what is even more unlikely is to take it even a step further, that the ever-elusive and in the show completely forgotten about Quaithe could be Mysaria as well. This claim seems to have way less evidence towards it than the Melisandre part, but there are multiple people in Reddit and other forums and even on YouTube that I have seen claim that this could be a way for House of the Dragon to tidy up the Quaithe storyline. We've yet to see any reason for this other than why not, in my opinion, and I think it's very likely that neither of these are true. The Melisandre theory, part of this theory, is a lot more interesting, and I could see them wanting to link the two shows, but I think it's most likely that Mysaria is simply just the White Worm. What do you think?
Yeah, I would have to say it's more likely that if she is one of those two, it's more likely that she is Quaithe than it is that she's Melisandre.
You think so?
I do.
Okay.
If she is, I'm not saying, I don't think she's actually either of them.
Yeah, I think this one's a little ridiculous.
Yeah. Now that's not to say that Mysaria couldn't go on to be somebody different or important, or a character maybe we don't even know about exists yet. And I do think, hopefully, that season 2 will sort of expand on Mysaria as that sort of Melisandre type side mystical character. Right now, she's really the route they're going with her is this sort of like Varys character or Littlefinger character, but who knows, maybe she is dabbling a little bit more into the dark arts, if you will. So I think the likelihood of her being Melisandre is quite unlikely, because I think Melisandre probably, when she was younger, looks like the character she looks like in the books and the show. I think that's probably that like whatever Melisandre is presenting herself at, that's probably what she looks like.
Yeah. One of the reasons why some people pointed to Melisandre for Mysaria, though, is because the last thing we see of Mysaria in season 1 of the House of the Dragon is that the building is lit on fire, and we kind of assume she's dead. No body, no case.
Right.
I don't know if I believe that. And knowing what we know from Fire and Blood, but some people said, hey, the way she could survive the fire is that she looks into the flame. She looks into the fire.
Let's go.
She's a red witch. Let's go. I mean, guys, we know that this is preposterous, but it's kind of fun.
Right? It's the iceberg.
It's the iceberg.
It gets deeper and deeper.
It gets worse. It gets worse from here.
Yeah. So if I had to pick of the two, the idea of her being Quaithe, I think, makes a little more sense of the two. Not saying that she is Quaithe, but to certainly have fun with it. I think the idea of her being Quaithe is far more interesting, because Quaithe is somebody who presents some very important information and prophetic information to Daenerys.
Yeah.
And Quaithe is somebody who is going to have some sort of a role to play in the final 2 books. George Martin has said that, like, we're not really done with her yet. She will have a role to play in the show. It's just easy to kind of move on. Do I think that Mysaria is the person who would be Quaithe? It just would be a really hard sell in the books, simply because you would need to explain who Mysaria is in the regular Song of Ice and Fire books, because you haven't had that.
Right.
If I do think that she is probably somebody, like a Shiera Seastar, Bloodraven's paramour, and you can dive into that and make that sort of be a agent on his behalf or whatever. And that cool. Quaithe, I do believe Quaithe's identity will sort of be somewhat revealed. We don't have to have her take off the mask and it's this big huge reveal, right. Yeah. It's going to be somebody that's going to sort of be like, okay, and we'll understand the reasoning for it. Mm-hmm. I actually kind of liked Melisandre's end in the show, that she just was like, okay, we defeated the Night King, like, I'm done now.
Yeah, out of all the things that we didn't like some characters' endings, and I could actually go into a big tangent about things that I did like, even though there's a lot to dislike. That was one of them that I was kind of okay with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I thought this theory was kind of cool. I do think that they would like to tie in Melisandre, probably, but just because the actress is willing, and it does kind of make sense in the timeline that they can make it work. But you're right. Like, why would Mysaria end up being Melisandre and then have someone else play her? Like, the idea would be for the Easter egg to be the actress,
Yeah.
But this is one of those the theories on the iceberg. There are some on here, especially we get down deeper. They're a little bit more obscure. Only a couple people mentioning them. This one had a lot more traction than I expected. A lot of comments on different threads, saying, no, I'm telling you, it's Melisandre. And It's like, I don't know, guys. I don't know. Maybe her bad accent is on purpose.
Maybe. Okay, awesome. Okay, well, I'll move on to my next one. And this one's a little hot. This is a hot take.
Oh, man.
Also a little controversial. Okay.
Just a little.
Dany didn't burn King's Landing. One of the most controversial scenes of the final season of Game of Thrones came in episode 5 The Bells, where Daenerys Targaryen burns down King's Landing. Many fans felt this went against her overall character arc in the course of the show and even in the books. But given in House of Dragon, we see a scene in which Aemond Targaryen and Valerion's dragons act against their own wishes. It results in the start of the Dance of the Dragons and Lucerys' death. Fans have speculated immediately that perhaps this was what happened in season 8 of Game of Thrones. And it wasn't Daenerys that initially wanted to burn King's Landing, but her dragon Drogon. No, Drogon. After all, Drogon does burn the Iron Throne after she's killed by Jon.
No, Drogon, no. Woo, my face hurts from laughing. Oh, that's ridiculous. They did
so
it.
likelihood. So likelihood of that one, Jimmy? Or?
Absolutely not. I mean, we never do see Daenerys' POV in the show when she's burning King's Landing. Like, we just see the dragon flying over and from everyone else's perspective. So maybe there's a fight, maybe she's covering up for her child whenever she, tells Jon, like, we'll make them understand, with her little like pseudo Hitler psychotic stare. Yeah, this is absolutely ludicrous.
Well, let me attack this one. So I obviously do not believe that Drogon. Well, I don't know. Actually, hold on. Let me think about this for a second. So one of the things people were saying about the Aemond and Lucerys scene was that even though they were saying like, no, like, obey me, listen to me, that the dragons were actually still acting on the writer's sort of intent. And so this is one of the things where it seems like, because if you do get this sort of shot of Daenerys before she burns everything down, is that perhaps, maybe she's thinking about it, but Drogon is the one that like kicks off.
No, Drogon, no.
I know. It's just the idea of everything.
This might be my favorite. This is my second favorite theory
of the whole thing.
Of the whole iceberg. This is my second favorite theory. Yeah.
Yeah. But what do you think about the idea though of the dragons perhaps acting based purely on like having sort of a true like sort of emotional connection?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Like, we can't pretend to understand dragon bonds because the books tell us that we can't. So, like, that's fine. But I think it's very reasonable to imagine that they can pick up on emotions whenever there is some sort of bond. I think we see that a little bit actually with Helaena, like right before she commits suicide. I think that that's a really emotional moment. One of the better scenes actually with the dragons for me in season 1. So I don't know. I think it's definitely possible.
Because there are moments like on the bridge in Dragonstone where like Daemon's standing there and his dragon then flies over and lands on the other side. So his dragon already kind of knows like what to do. So that is some sort of emotional bond. So if Dany has this with her dragons, then perhaps Drogon's really the one who burns down King's Landing.
Hey,
also, why does he just burn the Iron Throne at the end? See,
yeah.
he just hated it.
I think Drogon was playing some 4D chess.
Yeah, he said, "See, I hate the throne. Throne bad.
Pointy chair.
the pointy chair bad."
We're gonna get some mean comments from
serious.
Yeah, we're gonna get some hate mail for that one, I think.
Not as much as Dan and Dave got for people hating the Daenerys's arc there
Yeah.
at the end.
I mean, if anything, we can maybe this is how I can go.
Does that
season 8.
if that happened, does that help Daenerys's case, or does it just make season 8 that much worse?
Honestly, I think it makes it better because I don't know if it could get much worse in that regard. Now we're not going to go on a big season 8 thing, but I just want to say that there are some parts of season 8 I enjoyed.
Oh, I still say I love the first 3 episodes.
Yeah, there's some stuff I really enjoy about that, and maybe we'll do a a flashback episode where we can kind of talk about what we like, because me and you have never discussed on the podcast those things. But honest to God, I'm going to use this as headcanon now, even though I don't
see the Night King didn't want to burn down the wall. Viserys did it.
I blame the dragons.
I blame the dragons.
The people were good.
Well, see, one of the other things is Viserys talks about how he's like, no, we don't control the dragons. That's right. Like, we don't really think, we're foolish for thinking we actually control them.
That's right.
See, Dany didn't control Drogon. Drogon said, I'm going to burn all these mothers up.
And with this, we have now just calmed a lot of the distaste that people have grown to have for season 8. We fixed it. So thanks, HBO.
There we go.
Check. All right, we'll move on. This one is interesting. It is, I don't know if it's as ridiculous as the Dany didn't burn King's Landing, but here we go. Larys is a warg and possibly a green seer. Larys is a very enigmatic character who not only harbors the ability to get things done in the shadows, but also to do extreme acts of brutality. His wealth of intimate knowledge of those around the Red Keep enables him to be a very effective player in the Game of Thrones, specifically for Alicent. While him being club-footed and therefore ignored and invisible by many of the noble people at court could be used as a justification for his ability to listen closely to private conversations, there are further explanations, more fantastical explanations as well. Some people believe that simply overhearing some key conversations would not lead to all of the intimate knowledge that Larys possesses about key people in the Red Keep. Some have even linked his ability to manipulate people to legendary figure in Westeros, Bloodraven. Could Larys be a green seer like Bloodraven? And to take it one step further, could Larys also possess the power of warging? This theory stems from the fact that Larys' wealth of knowledge, but also imagery of what was extremely prevalent in House of the Dragon Season 1, which was rats running all over the Red Keep. In many, many key scenes, we see rats infesting the dragon's skull, infesting the blood-ridden floors after the brutal beatdown that we see Cristin Cole deal out. Is Varys working into the rats in the castle and spying this way? Is he seeing conversations that he should not be seeing by using these rats that are all over the Red Keep? Or is he working with a more human-like network of spies akin to Varys from Game of Thrones? Either way, Larys is one to keep our eye on as we move forward in House of the Dragon for sure.
I think this one has some validity to it.
I don't hate it. There's nothing in the Strong family line that would tip us to believe that he should have green dreams, but we don't really know what
that much about the Strong line, because he's the end of it.
Yeah, he thins it out a little bit, doesn't he? I don't know, man. I like this one. I think it's harmless, by the way. Like, I think that this will never be confirmed in the show. I don't think. I might be wrong. Which we have some more Larys theories coming that are way more ridiculous than this. But this one's harmless in the fact that, like, if this is never confirmed or denied by the show, we could believe it and it doesn't change much. You know what I mean? So this one's kind of cool. Definitely takes a step further with the warging. Like, even a green seer, it's like, okay, well, maybe like he's seeing things and he knows positions to be in for the future. But warging into the rats would be like a whole nother level, more akin to Bran than Bloodraven. You know, because Brandon was a green seer and a warg, whereas Bloodraven was just a green seer. So this would make Larys one of the more powerful people ever in Westeros history if it were true.
It would explain a lot. You know, I mean, there's a kind of ridiculous theory and it's actually more ridiculous than this one, that Varys is a merman. And it talks about the idea that Varys is able to sort of like swim across the narrow sea, and that's how he can like, he knows so why everything that's going on over in Essos, because he could just go back and forth. It's pretty ridiculous, but a fun one. This one actually sort of makes a lot of sense. I mean, warging is something that's not very common, but it's in the series, the main series, like, well, it's kind of common. All the Stark children can do it. Some of the wildlings can do it. We don't know really anything about the House Strong because Larys is the end of it. He's the end of the House Strong line, and they're just sort of there. And in the books, really, again, it's sort of rough outline, so we don't know. So I think it actually would make a lot of sense if he were a warg, and I think it'd actually be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it would be neat. And the rats were a very good piece of symbolism of like things like being messy in the Red Keep, but also like eating within the beast beneath the wards. A lot of people thought the beast beneath the wards, before we saw what it was the rats. Like a lot of people thought that that's what she meant, Helaena, whenever she said that. So, the rats could just be symbolism, but maybe it's more than that. Like maybe there's a reason why we're seeing them. And I know me and you mentioned it after every single episode. Like, what's up with the rats? Like, there has to be something more. And this is a very interesting this is an interesting justification, not just for that symbolism, but I've seen a lot of people levy the criticism that they felt like Larys hasn't really been given enough context, meaning that like he just seems evil for evil's sake, like killing his entire family, which is a massive deal in Westeros. He kind of just does it, and we don't really know, other than maybe just some ambition, but like, what is that ambition? Maybe him being a green seer would give him foresight to know that the events need to play out this way, and that's why he's so willing to go ahead and do these things. Also, I mean, it could be the fact that he's club-footed and has probably been looked down upon, and he's not the strongest of the bunch, compared to Harwin. And so, I mean, there's definitely some natural bridges we can build to get to these assumptions of why he did what he did. But it is interesting and fun to look at the fantastical elements of it as well and say, well, maybe he knows something we don't.
And he also seems like he kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like in the show, it just seems like, whoa, he just came like
in front of a weirwood. Just say it.
This is one actually that I could see. And it would be kind of cool because the books are told to us through Mushroom and Maester. So then it's like, okay, so it would make sense that they would not know that he's a warg, but the show could totally do it. Then it would also make him seem a lot more powerful and evil as a villain.
Yeah, and I think it wouldn't be bad to give a little bit more nuance to him of like why he's doing what he's doing, other than just the fact that he happens to be a disabled person in Westeros. Like that is pretty two-dimensional, right? Like we should be able to do a little bit more of that. We should be able to get some more, and we have time, so we'll see what happens. He's certainly got a role to play in the future of House of the Dragon, and who knows, maybe he'll be warging into a dragon. I don't know. Why not?
Yeah. Here we go. So today is tier 4. We're in the darkest tier. Okay, these are the wildest theories going around on the internet for House of the Dragon. So I'm gonna start here, and this one I almost thought should have been. This is the one I sort of thought might be in my mind was the tier 5. But then, I don't know, Jimmy, the more I started researching and reading and typing this out, this might make some sense. Okay, but we'll let you guys decide. Alicent becomes Melisandre. The Dance of the Dragons is one of the most devastating wars in Westeros history, and many of the key players either die in battle or through execution. However, Alicent Hightower is one of the key figures who actually survives the war. Her end is a little anticlimactic. In the book, she just wastes away in a tower, locking herself in her room as she mourns over all of her fallen family members. This could be one area that the show changes. Her death in general could be far more dramatic. Maybe she dies in execution or by a dragon. Who knows? But it's probably one area the show is actually going to differ then. However, if they really wanted to connect to the two shows, one way could be by making Alicent become Melisandre. Fans have been speculating about this online through Reddit forums and in Twitter, and in some ways, I think it makes some sense. No one would have predicted the route that they are going with Aegon's prophecy before seeing House of the Dragon, or Alicent's personality in general. In the books, she comes across as far more devious and evil. Here, she seems a little more innocent and even naive. But she may become obsessed with the Song of Ice and Fire, and she could perhaps fake her death and continue trying to fulfill this prophecy by any means necessary.
You've lost your mind. You've lost your mind. And you know, I thought I knew you. I thought we were on the same page. I mean, come on. This is
Hold on a
ridiculous.
second. Does it make more sense? Because the tier above was perhaps Mysaria becomes Melisandre or Quaithe. I think we may need to flip them around because I think this one. I think this one.
You know what I do like about this theory is that it is cashing in on Alicent being so pious in season 1.
Right.
And then feeling like maybe her prayers were not answered by the old gods, and then she becomes faithful to R'hllor. And maybe in a future season, and again, I'm just kind of playing along here, but like, let's say maybe in a future season, a red priest or priestess shows up and starts to work on her. And as she's seeing, you know, her family die all around her, maybe she has a change of heart and she sees that the Lord of Light is the true way. And then she hears about Azor Ahai, and you know what? Maybe, folks.
Maybe Alicent is Lightbringer. Okay. did she stabbed Rhaenyra, or she cut Rhaenyra with the dagger that contains the prophecy? Okay.
Oh my god. It's ludicrous. I mean,
the idea of her being obsessed with the prophecy is something that I never thought they were going to go that route in the show ever. I mean, we never assumed that. And then she hears it and it's become this huge part of Westeros history now.
Yeah, it is. And it's also somewhere, you know, this would obviously be a departure from the books, but it is one that they could do and it still makes sense in the show canon. You know, I think people will have a problem with it, but it is possible. I think that it is maybe not likely, but the show canon, this could work. Obviously for the books, this is off the table. But you're right. Her ending in the books is, while very melancholy, is very anticlimactic. And it is, I don't see a way forward with the future seasons of her fading to the background. Like, I just don't see that happening with Olivia Cook. And there's too much investment from the audience at this point. Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, essentially, you know, if you begin to look at towards the end of the series and you start thinking about, well, what would the final episode of House of the Dragon be? Right. I mean, you think probably it's going to be Hour of the Wolf. It's going to include a coronation of Aegon the III. So what's Alicent do? She's just sitting in a tower all by herself, and that's
gee willikers.
Right. That's it. I mean, I just don't know. You'd have to zoom ahead for her to die. So unless it's just her sitting there all alone, right?
Which I mean, I do think like in the books that is like actually really like traumatic, right? Like I think that it's a terrible reality to be locked away in a tower. It does kind of call back, you know, it's a little bit to Rhaenyra talking about how she didn't want to be someone that's locked away in a tower giving birth to children.
Right.
Like that, you know, that was a really important line in season 1 because that's actually exactly what happens to Rhaenyra in her last episode. She is locked away in a tower while, you know, Daemon's basically running her council and she's giving birth. So I think there's a lot of weight to that statement. So it could play into the idea that Alicent just ends up rotting away in a tower, but I don't know if people would love that ending. So I think if anything we could take from this theory, if we want to be, you know, a little less crazy, would definitely be the fact that I think there's going to be a change to her arc.
Definitely.
But I do like the idea of this theory, mainly because it could work with how old Melisandre is talked about to be in the show, right? And it does cash in on the piety of Alicent.
Right. So more likely scenario of the two theories that we have placed into this iceberg. Again, these are not, we did not sit here and say these are what we believe. These are like things that were trending on Reddit and Twitter that we pulled to sort of
some of these are from Vox in here and Collider. Like major media outlets have put this stuff pen to page. So we didn't just like
more likely that Melisandre is Alicent, or more likely that this, we have to run a YouTube poll. More likely that Melisandre would be Alicent or Mysaria.
I think Mysaria's character probably needs more. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like she in her background is mysterious, and how does she have this much influence? I don't think either are likely, but more likely it might. But like, I don't know, man. Like Alicent doesn't look anything like Melisandre either, though. I guess
Right.
it was Mysaria though. So I don't
I see. I think I'm flipped now. I think it's more. It's just because we've yet to have anything that specifically ties Mysaria. It's like, so at least with Alicent,
Oh
at
my
least with
God.
Alicent, you have, there's two parts where it's, to me, it's like, okay, again, I'm not saying this is the case, but I have two clear indicators that sort of make more sense to me than Mysaria. One is the potential for a real obsession of the Song of Ice and Fire.
Yes.
She learns this secret. She believes it's going to be true, and she'll go by whatever means necessary. Two, the end of her life in the books, and most likely in the show, there's really nothing for her to do.
Mm-hmm.
So this gives her like a path forward. So that's where I'm like, okay, again, I don't think either are true, but if I had to sort of pick one, Mysaria's is just that she's foreign,
but how do you
and mysterious.
I
mean, I mean, it's just like, okay, well, I guess, you know, I mean,
it's like, why not? It's a why not. Whereas
right,
like the
Alicent
one
has
has
a
tie.
legitimate tie to potentially the Lord of Light and defeating the White Walkers and the evil.
Yes.
And
Yes. Okay, so here's a question. Let's just pretend that Alicent is Melisandre.
okay.
Or because we shouldn't say is, becomes Melisandre, as it's stated in the iceberg. How do you do that on screen? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I don't know how you would.
You leave it open-ended, and her exit from the show is like sailing across the narrow sea to like
You'd
with a
have to.
priestess who has come, and then like we just assume like, whoa, is that Melisandre? Is that her? You know, like I
Right.
don't know.
The problem is that the actress who plays Melisandre has specific, what's a I forget her first name, but
Catherine something
like Van something or other. Yeah, she specifically said she wants to be in House of the Dragon.
I mean, yeah, she probably wants that sweet paycheck. Karis Van Houten.
Van Houten, yeah.
Hutton.
Yeah, I mean, she actually would make sense. It actually makes more sense that she would meet Alicent. It's just that also she specifically has held like the dagger that Arya uses to kill the Night King, and Melisandre is the one who sort of gives Arya the final prep top to go kill the Night King with the dagger that Alicent has used. I mean, and it's specifically tied to the Song of Ice and Fire.
Listen, I'm not saying it's impossible. Man, people would be so mad.
Oh,
it would melt the internet.
If you think people are upset about Daenerys at season 8, people would lose their minds in this.
You know what? I'm all for it. It sounds great. Chaos. Let's go.
It also makes more sense that old Melisandre that we see without her, you know, glamour would be Alicent than
without
Mysaria.
Yeah. For sure.
Ridiculous. Absolutely. All of the ones we have today are ridiculous. So I don't know. The next one I have is pretty legit too, but we'll go back and forth. So Jimmy, you may have to do, because our next two sort of go hand in hand. So you may have to do your final one.
Okay, I will do what I think is the most ridiculous. I think this is the most ridiculous thing.
Period.
I guess even no matter what way we stack them, it's going to be back to back, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe we should save that one.
Well, okay. Well, maybe I'll just do. Okay, maybe I'll just go next, and then you then we can do it, and then So I'll go next, and then we can.
Okay, cool.
Makes sense. Okay,
we'll do it.
It gets deep. It gets deeper.
Yeah,
the way it goes, it actually gets deeper. Okay. Daemon is Bloodraven in Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, we see Bran Stark influenced through dreams of the Three-Eyed Raven, a character who has the ability to see into past events through the power of weirwood trees. We really get no explanation to his backstory or how he came to obtain this ability. In the books, the character is known as the Three-Eyed Crow and is Brendan Rivers, a Targaryen bastard of King Aegon IV, also known as Bloodraven. Bloodraven is a practicer of the dark arts, serves as hand of the king, and has a vast spy network before he's sent to the wall for committing a war crime. He quickly becomes Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, but disappears mysteriously for decades until we see him in the main book series. This is an area where the show could make a rather large change and perhaps make this character Daemon Targaryen. While accounts of the end of the Dance of the Dragons makes it seem as if Daemon dies in battle with Aemond in a dragon versus dragon combat above the God's Eye, Daemon's body is never found, leading to speculation that he somehow survives the battle. Given the proximity to the God's Eye itself and speculation to what is actually on the island, the connection to Weirwoods and possibly Children of the Forest, it's possible in the show Daemon, not Bloodraven, could be taken by the Children of the Forest to serve as the Three-Eyed Raven.
All right, listen, I mocked you and I said that we lost you. I might buy this one.
I think I could. It would be a very. I could see it.
Like
the old.
It's ridiculous.
It really. Well, yes. So first of all, I guess we need to talk. There's so many things we need to break down in this. One. Good move or bad move in Game of Thrones of not explaining further who the Three-Eyed Raven was.
Well, bad in the sense that they should have done it. But
right.
Okay in the fact that like maybe this ties in later. This is also something they could inspect in like the Dunk and Egg show if they do that. Like that's
exactly
the way they could tie it in. Like I think that's a lot more logical than this theory. But leaving it ambiguous definitely leaves it open for the show canon, which that's all we're talking about, folks. The show canon.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like all of these. But the show could now use that if they wanted to.
Possibly. They could. And it would connect them. Yeah, what's interesting is that, in the show, the Three-Eyed Raven, well, for starters, it's one of those other things where you see the Three-Eyed Raven once, right? And it's a totally different actor and stuff like that. Then they cut back to him and he's got a shaved head. I don't know how that works, but whatever. And they didn't really explain it further. In the books, the character is so much more important, so much bigger. And the fact that it's Bloodraven is such a big deal. And again, we probably have a lot of new listeners today. And just in general, if you're somebody who, I know we have a lot of our listeners in general are show watchers only. So you're like, I don't even know who this character is, right? I mean, you know who the Three-Eyed Raven is, but you're unfamiliar with, say, Bloodraven. Very important character. I mean, very, very, very important. And they didn't touch on that in the show, which I guess is sort of fine because maybe you don't have the time, or maybe you don't want to introduce yet another Targaryen. And of course, even the fact that Bloodraven gets to that cave and becomes this character in its own right in the books is still yet to be explained and very significant. I do believe in Winds of Winter we will get some more details of that event because it's very important and has a lot of implications for Bran going forward. But here, if you did want to make it Daemon, there's a lot of reasoning for it. And also, Daemon's death in the books is also incredibly mysterious. When he and Aemond have the big battle over the God's Eye, dragon versus dragon combat, we know that Daemon either jumps from his dragon or something, stabs Aemond through the non-eye, and Aemond's body is recovered years later. Daemon's body is never found. So we don't know exactly what happens to him. Some people believe he swims over to shore, but it's also by the God's Eye, a very mysterious island, which could, in all honesty, have like all of the big secrets of A Song of Ice and Fire could take place on this island that's full of weirwood trees and perhaps Children of the Forest. And if Daemon were to, say, end up over there, who knows? Yeah. I also think the possibility, one last thing. I also think the possibility that even in the books, if Daemon does survive, he could serve as a three-eyed crow or raven, or, three-eyed crow in the books, before Bloodraven, because we don't even know who was there before Bloodraven. Was there another person? Like, what's going on in that cave?
Shit. Okay. I like where you're going with this. Yeah, you're right. We don't know what comes before Brennan Rivers. Was there a Bloodraven? Like, or was there the Three-Eyed Crow before Brennan Rivers? That's a good question to ask, probably, right? And hopefully we get those kind of answers in the books. I mean, I do think that this is a cool theory in the sense that I don't believe that Daemon, if the body's not found in fantasy, folks, it means they're alive. Every time. And a lot of people have speculated that Daemon just runs away with Nettles. Some people, I've seen some theories say that they think Mysaria will end up being Nettles, like a stand-in for Nettles. I've seen some other theories as well, but I can't remember exactly who the person was. But regardless, I mean, I do think that we're going to get the answers of what happens to Daemon's body at the end of House of the Dragon. And while we're still asking what that will be, this theory is in play.
Yeah. I actually think it's more likely that Daemon dies in the show, but lives in the books.
You think?
Yeah, it's just his character. This is where I could go either way. That's another thing. Like, that's another theory we don't even know yet. We'll have to come back for another iceberg, as we get maybe season 2, because once we have some more information, it's just Daemon's character is so strong and powerful, and he's making these decisions. It's just, it's one of these things that it's just like, it would be so fitting to really kill him in this battle. But if you do go this route, then it has potentially huge implications to tie into Game of Thrones and potentially going further.
Yeah, definitely.
Because Daemon, it's one of these other questions. When Daemon chokes Rhaenyra, is he's part of him is very upset that, that Viserys told her this thing, this secret, this sort of like heir. Like, that's really what it was more about. Like, hold on, he actually did choose you sort of as an heir over me. He told you the secret. He's my brother. But I wonder if Daemon will begin to question her at some point. Like, what is the significance of this? And I could see Daemon thinking of himself as this true savior of Westeros.
Yeah, I could see that. I also can see the idea of him wanting to get away from it all. And the fact that one of the things that's been most important to Daemon throughout this whole process in the show is that he wants to return the Targaryens to their proper place as, being superior. And he really does care about the Targaryen name and the family, and at least what it represents. And as he's seeing the dance happen and he's watching everything come crashing down and everyone he knows dying, does he just give up on that at some point and want to go away? Maybe. It's going to take a lot of character development to get him to that point from what we've seen in season 1, but we do have a lot of time. So, I don't know. This is a fun one. This is a really fun theory. It is outlandish, but like I said, it's still in play. It's almost Daemon in a way is almost like Stannis, where Stannis decides, I'm going to go take on the others. Right, that's the whole reason he goes north of the wall. Right, all right, we'll go take him on. We'll go defeat this army Melisandre is telling me to defeat, because then it will show Westeros that I am the true king. I can see that. I can see Daemon doing the same thing. I see. Yeah, and start going down and then start doubting that path. Yeah, it absolutely could happen.
And maybe it's King's blood. Daemon has King's blood. Well, maybe that's what the children of the forest need, and that could tie him in. And maybe that's really the whole deal, and it's maybe not so much green seers, and it's much more.
You're bucking up against the next theory, my friend.
I know. Well, let's dive into that one, right?
Let's do it.
Now we're gonna dive a different path.
We're gonna dive a different path, but with the same player, and that is Daemon. Daemon Targaryen becomes the Night King. Daemon Targaryen is a very distinct looking individual. There's no doubt about that. And fans have went wild for the portrayal of Daemon by Matt Smith in the show and looked under every nook and cranny for a way to connect him with the wider Game of Thrones universe. They have really outdone themselves, however, because there is now speculation and theories claiming Daemon is the White Walker King we see in a Game of Thrones television show. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is insane and borderline dumb, but let's just think about it for just 1 second. The White Walker King has long, flowing, white golden locks, just like Daemon, and they both sport a pretty nice studded vest. However, the more compelling piece of this ludicrous theory is that the reason the Night King was able to zombify and then ride an ice dragon was due to the fact that the Night King and Daemon both have magical blood. If Daemon is the Night King, he not only has whatever White Walkers have in their blood, but he also has the Targaryen blood that has been so magical throughout the series. White Walker and Targaryen meet in one of the most absurd theories we've had yet.
You know, we covered a similar one, right? In that Viserys was the Night King. This one is even more ludicrous.
I mean, it's not.
It's even more ridiculous.
This theory is really bad because it's based on like hair, like as if like when they were casting the White Walker King, they said, "Well, make sure he has long blonde hair so we can connect it to House of the Dragon that we don't know it's in pilot." You know what I mean? Like, there's just no way. The thing I like, the creative part of this theory that I enjoy, even though I think it's hogwash, is the fact that how did the Night King ride a dragon and how was he able to command the dragon? Well, of course, he's a Targaryen. He had Targaryen blood.
Right. Well, I know we talked about that when we did the Viserys one. Well, like it just makes it like, first of all, in the show we see the guy, and we talked about the possibility of
unreliable narrator.
Right. We see the guy. It's like we see it, and then it's just how could it possibly be? How could it possibly be Daemon? Like Bloodraven to me makes way more sense.
Oh,
right,
without a doubt,
way more sense. But the Night King, so the children of the forest decide they want to turn him into an other. He doesn't even die anywhere close. Like,
well, there's Weirwoods. Maybe the children of the forest of the God's Eye. Like God's Eye. I don't know. Maybe, probably not.
I
right?
guess. It makes the idea that the Night King is Daemon and like wanting revenge makes far more sense than Viserys.
Oh, definitely.
Because it just fits Daemon's personality a little bit more.
Well, another cool thing is like, I guess one of the symbols that you could take from this is like, if Daemon is the Night King, it is him fulfilling the other side of the prophecy that his brother never told him. Like, there's some cool symbolism in that, right? Like he is the opposing force. He is so offended that he takes the other side, right? I think that's kind of a neat way that you could tie it together. That was not in the theory that I found online. However, if I could help them out, I'd probably throw that as a bullet point underneath this outrageous theory. But yeah, I don't know. This one's pretty ridiculous.
I guess in a way he does kind of. I'm pulling up pictures now. He does sort of look. I guess he does look a little like Daemon. Daemon looks a lot more like the White Walker. I think the one that Sam sees.
Yes,
and I think it's the one that Jon fights.
Yeah, this is the one that the theory is actually referring to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just don't know.
I mean, the answer is it's not true. That's the answer. There's no way.
It's like here we always try to make theories work. I always try to see it, but this one I'm just like, could he be a White Walker? Yes,
like one of the like head walkers that we saw.
Yeah, I could in theory see that. Of course, that would mean Daemon survives his battle with Aemond, goes to the God's Eye, and the children of the forest do something. Take him north and turn him into a White Walker. Just the Night King himself. It's just hard because the show showed them do something with him.
Yeah.
It also just makes zero sense. It just but that's what these deep theories are about.
If it wasn't for the last theory on this iceberg, I would say it's the most unlikely.
Yes, but the next one. Although, well, I don't know. This might be a little more to it. Let's dive in.
All right. To round off this iceberg at the very tip of the bottom of this rabbit hole is our final theory. Buckle up. Larys did Summerhall. The tragedy at Summerhall was a fire at Summerhall, a pleasure castle of House Targaryen in the Dornish Marches in 259 AC. The conflagration caused the deaths of, among others, King Aegon V Targaryen his eldest son, Prince Duncan Targaryen, the Sir Duncan the Tall, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. The cause of the fire is yet unknown, but was connected with King Aegon's desire to restore dragons to the Seven Kingdoms. The last years of his reign were consumed by a search for ancient lore about the dragon breeding of Valyria, and it is said that Aegon commissioned journeys to places as far away as the Shire with the hopes of finding texts and knowledge that had not been preserved in Westeros. In 259 AC, Aegon summoned many of those closest to him to Summerhall to celebrate the impending birth of his first great-grandchild to Aerys and Rhaenyra, the children of Aegon's heir, Prince Jaehaerys. Many died, and fire destroyed the castle, leaving it a ruin. According to Barristan Selmy, sorcery was even involved. Now, this is where it gets crazy. Tons of theories have sprouted from Summerhall's tragedy, but none more sensational than the theory that Larys Strong is responsible for the tragedy at Summerhall. The idea that Larys is a warg and using rats around the Red Keep has spiraled into people believing that he might also be connected to the Weirwood network. By the end of the House of the Dragon television show, his signature murder plot for his own family using fire and then attempting a hit on Mysaria by burning down her buildings are consistent with the fire tragedy at Summerhall. Could it be at the end of House of the Dragon, Larys' disdain for the Targaryens lead him to entering the Weirwoods network and being able to travel to the future in time, the opportune time, to stop the Targaryens from returning to their pre-Dance of the Dragon power levels with big, youthful, capable dragons?
I was trying to find it over here because when we first announced this one and we said it was the most ridiculous thing we'd ever heard, I was like, I agree 100%. But the actor just spoke at that Game of Thrones convention, and I'm trying to find the quote, but he spoke a little bit about like Larys actually having magic, like one of the questions asked, and he kind of hinted to the possibility of it. He didn't flat out say it. Of course, then he went on a big rant about feet fetish. But so I'm not saying that Larys has any sort of magical abilities, but the actor has sort of alluded to the idea that he might. Now, does it have anything to do that he could participate in some event that takes place years later?
He would literally have to travel like decades,
In
centuries, in time to get to this point in history. And I just don't think so. I don't see it. And also, like, so we've seen the ability for Bran. And by the way, again, we didn't make this up. There are people online who believe this is a theory.
Oh, there's the lot.
This one's popular. But we've seen Bran be able to like see back in history and kind of manipulate events like by whispering into the wind. This is straight up embodying, you know what I mean? Now maybe Larys ends up being Bloodraven. I just don't see how it works. I mean, we're talking about time traveling with your body going in forward. Like, just because Summerhall is obviously tied to the Targaryens and it ends in fire. Someone was like, well, Larys used fire twice and he's around the Targaryens. Maybe he takes Alicent's pledge like all the way to the future. It's just so outlandish.
Maybe feet are his he sees feet and that sort of awakens his magical abilities.
And he's able to just walk his way into the future.
Maybe. Well, if he can warg into rats, could he warg into something that could live long enough to cause him to be able to influence the events at Summerhall?
Like a weirwood tree. Which, by the way, still doesn't make any sense because weirwoods don't grow indoors.
Right. Could he... Now, see, he could have something to do with... See, this is weird. So Summerhall, I don't think so. I just don't see any way he's involved in Summerhall. Harrenhal and its sort of curse and building and helping to absolutely, because Harrenhal is completely a cursed location.
Yeah, I mean, it is cursed and anything can happen.
Absolutely. And he's one of the key contributors to something that happens there. He may reawaken evil spirits. Could those spirits then travel to Summerhall? Again, guys, we're stretching it here. Okay, this is the deepest, darkest parts of the iceberg.
I'm stretched about as far as it gets. I just don't. There's no way. There's literally no way. And the fact that like someone like posted this online and then multiple people were like, you know what? I'm in.
Let me think about this for a second. What happens to his foot?
How does
Do
he
we
become a
know?
clubfoot? Do you think he tripped over the weirwood branch?
No. At the end, he's beheaded by Cristin Stark, but he
Right.
asked for one thing, and that's his foot is cut off. That way, he's like, although his head's cut off too, so I don't know, whatever. But he just wants his foot to be destroyed. Does it say what happens to it? I don't think it does.
Did they feed it to one of the weirwood faces? This
No, but
Alicent.
could the bones of his foot have made it to Summerhall?
What?
Is there a curse that travels with his foot?
The curse of the web toes.
We've added a deeper portion of the iceberg. Larys's foot is responsible for Summerhall.
I'm gonna throw out the I'm calling to the banners here. If you are listening and you have any idea how this could work, send us a raven. Plug the email address, Matt, because I forget it right now. btkcast@gmail.com.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Here we go.
All right.
It's from Fire and Blood.
All right.
And of course, the wiki. Says Larys the Strong's corpse was given to the Silent Sister, and years later, his bones were taken to Harrenhal as his final resting place. Okay. Cristin Stark ordered that the removed foot be buried in a field, but the limb disappeared before that could occur. As Larys was the last of his line, his death brought an end to House Strong.
Where is the foot, Matt?
What if the foot was buried in the field where Summerhall is built?
Oh my god!
Because I think Summerhall is pretty new, right? I'm gonna go check it out.
Yeah, well, it's the pleasure paradise, right? Like that's the whole idea.
Right. Summerhall. I mean, look up when it's built.
Pleasure
Founded in 188 AC. So it's founded during House.
It's like 71 years before
right.
Before it gets burnt down.
So it exists. But who knows? Where'd the foot go? Could it have been taken to Summerhall?
Does anyone know where Larys's foot ended up? That seems significant.
Also, what's the deal with the Silent Sisters? And they just carry bones around Westeros because they have Ned Stark's bones. Yeah, and we don't know where they're at.
I think I trust.
In A Song of Ice and Fire, they still have Ned Stark's bones. They're supposed to be taking them back to Winterfell.
The Silent Sisters, also referred as the Stranger's Wives, Death's Handmaidens, and the Handmaidens of the Stranger, are an order of women belonging to the Faith of the Seven. They are sworn to the service of the Stranger and have taken vows of chastity and silence. The Silent Sisters attend to the dead. They are not to be confused with septas.
Yeah.
It doesn't give us much, does it?
It does not, but it's all interesting. Well, that is the end of our iceberg, Jimmy. 3-parter.
4 tiers, 3 parts. We did it.
Are there even deeper, darker parts to this iceberg that will occur in the off season as we go into House of the Dragon? Yes, House of the Dragon season 2. There's been interviews. There actually was an interview with Larys, the actor who plays Larys, and he talked about his sort of foot fetish with Alicent and why he's doing it. And it sort of goes back to what we were talking about with control and things like that. But I think we'll get more info about it. And they are, as of our recording, I think they're casting. They're supposed to be done casting I think by the end of the new year. So, and production's supposed to start early 2023, which I think I'm going to release this on New Year's Day. So, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff came out of this first season. I mean, a lot of crazy stuff.
So let's just look back at the iceberg here. Which 2? Of course, you could pick one from tier 1 or something like that. But which theory was your favorite, or the one you found the most intriguing? It doesn't necessarily have to be the one that you believe most, but the one that you sort of just really caused you to think, wonder.
So I really like Viserys dreaming the dinner scene in episode 8 because I think that would be a really creative way of using perspective. Like, I think that's just a really fascinating device to use as a storyteller. I think that would be awesome if it were true. Other than that, I, I mean, I like Danny not bringing a King's Landing just because it's hilariously offensive. I'm gonna like it makes a lot of people upset, and I think that it's slightly funny. I think honestly, Daemon being Bloodraven is definitely one that I don't necessarily think is going to come true, but I like it.
Yeah, mine is similar. I think the one I really like Aemond is the father of the children,
Mm-hmm.
just because it really would add a lot of significance to basically House of the Dragon's Red Wedding scene.
Yeah,
Which, in all honesty, the way that I think they could make it even more. To me, it's even more heartbreaking than the Red Wedding. It's serious. Blood
it's
and
pretty bad.
cheese,
Yeah,
and of course, we're in complete spoiler territory here, which we've said at the beginning of the show. Especially because of now that we've seen Helaena Targaryen and she's sort of so sweet and so nice,
mm-hmm.
it makes it just would it's gonna make that scene even more sort of heartbreaking because now it'll feel like it was Aemon's fault, and it could be really the thing because Aemon, I think, still has this sort of love of Daemon or something where he sort of admires him, and
Yeah.
this could be the thing that pushes them over the edge, which could make their final battle great and be another thing that's will begin to rip Daemon and Rhaenyra apart.
Yeah.
Because Rhaenyra, this doesn't seem like something she's going to want to do, and Daemon seems like he's just going to do it without her consent.
Yeah, it's gonna be brutal, and I do think that because the characters are more fleshed out in the show than they are in Fire and Blood, that it's gonna have even more impact. Like reading it in Fire and Blood, you're like, that's crazy, and it
Right.
is tense enough in the book to where, like, I think I mean, I had an emotional reaction to it as a very visceral reaction because it is just a tragic thing to go through for anybody. But now that the characters have a lot more behind them, it's going to be really emotional for a national audience, I think. So if you throw this on top of it, it makes it
Right.
even more dramatic.
And we've talked about how they're going to do it, and I still say the way I would do it is I would sort of do like the camera facing Helena's eyes, right?
Yeah.
And you just makes it even more gut wrenching. I think it will be more impactful than the Red Wedding because the Red Wedding was really just all of our favorite characters died. And you're just like, what? It's like a huge shift, but it was like, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. This is just like downright evil.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
pretty
there's just no way around it.
yeah, it's pretty ruthless. I think the Red Wedding is very iconic because you really hadn't seen anything happen in the fantasy genre to that level. And you could even point to like if we go into television, like away from the book, in television, not many shows, if any, at that point had killed off like, a third, almost like
Right.
40% of their cast. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, for the main characters. So I do think like the Red Wedding stays extremely notable for its place in history, especially in the fantasy genre and books. But this you don't see coming because it's just diabolical. There's
Yeah.
not there. Rob makes a lot of really bad mistakes, and when you look at the way it all turns out, you can see how it got there. But with Blood and Cheese, it's just one mishap after the next in House of the Dragon of miscommunications and people saying the wrong thing at the wrong time or being too proud. And then this is like an escalation rather than like in the Red Wedding where it's actually almost a de-escalation because it ends the war, right? This
Right.
actually makes the war worse in House of the
Right.
Dragon. So it's interesting because there were really pivotal moments in the Song of Ice and Fire lore, but they actually are kind of polar opposites in what happens after.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be huge. So the other one I sort of had that I find really interesting was Bran is watching through the Weirwoods.
Yeah.
And it's just because whether the real thing is if Bran actually does something to influence
Mm-hmm.
an event. Like even you go back to the scene of the Tower of Joy where Ned Stark sort of turns as if he heard something. Like even something
Yep.
that small means Bran still influenced it,
Yeah.
you know,
Does
somehow.
the dagger? Here's my theory: is that the dagger ending up in the main show will be a result of an action that Bran influences.
Right.
That's my guess. And I don't know if it's going to necessarily be the Bran actor popping out and going, hey, put that in the bush over there. I think it might be as
see
simple
this
as
like
a
little, you
whisper.
see this like wheelchair like pop out of the back and like roll.
Like, God damn, they didn't have ramps back then? What the hell?
So ridiculous.
He's just stuck on the steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it'll probably be something a little bit less than that. It'll be a whisper, like you said, or some sort of sign, message in the fire right before Alicent becomes Melisandre. But
Right.
I do think that there has to be some connection. The Weirwoods aren't even supposed to be in King's Landing. Like that doesn't make sense for the book canon. So the fact that they were placed there, it could just be a prop, but it is odd that so many pivotal conversations happen right in front of the Weirwoods. They're within the shot. It feels like the Weirwood is going to have some sort of connection with, Bloodraven looking back, or Bran, or somebody. I don't know if they'll have an on-screen appearance per se, but I do think that the Weirwoods matter. I hope they matter, actually.
Yes, I do as well. So awesome. All right, guys. Well, with that, thank you guys for hanging out and doing all this big iceberg theories, madness with this. Yeah. So I'm going to put all these together into a bit. So to be part 3, as well as another podcast where you can listen to just the whole thing. If you want to go back through and dive into that. And then obviously now we're beginning the new year. We're going to be diving back into A Storm of Swords. And we've got some other fun things coming as well. Have some guests we're going to be bringing back on. A lot of fun, and have a ton of ravens. You guys have been sending us a huge amount of ravens. Really appreciate it. It is so much fun to keep diving into all of those. So with that, as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember that winter is coming.